Hi guys, welcome back to another maths lesson. I hope you're enjoying all these videos on fractions so far. Sorry about the sound issue yesterday. Last week we learned about different written methods of division. See if you can work out what 5,829 divided by 4 is. I feel like it will have a remainder. Our learning intention for today is to investigate equivalent fractions. Our success criteria is I can compare fractions by modelling them using visual aids, I know about different families of fractions, and I can compare fractions by looking at the denominator. Have a quick think, what does equivalent mean and what are equivalent fractions? You would have looked at this quite a lot in year 4, so it shouldn't be new to you. Remember, of course, when we're talking about fractions, what a fraction looks like. The numerator, which is the top half of the fraction, and it's talking about the specific number of parts that you have or that we're talking about. The bottom half, which is the denominator, tells you how many parts there are in the whole thing. And the line that separates the numerator and denominator is called a vinculum. And thanks, Kaya, for finding that the other day. Have a look at these statements. I just want to make sure that everybody is looking at some visual representations of fractions as well. Having a look at the first one, true or false, 6/9 is shaded. Well, I can see that 6 are coloured in and that there are 9 altogether, so true. B, 1/4 is shaded, or because 1/4 is the same as saying 1/4. 1 is shaded, and there are 4 equal parts altogether. The 3 that are not shaded, and the 1 that is, that's 4 altogether. So that's true. 1/3 is shaded. Well, in this one, there are actually 2 coloured in, and there are 4 equal parts altogether. So if we wanted that to be true, we'd have to say 2/4 are shaded. So that's false. And this one, 7/12 is shaded. Well, I can see that 8 are actually shaded out of 12, so that one is also false. Today we're going to look at equivalent fractions and families of fractions. Equivalent fractions are different to fractions that represent equivalent fractions are different fractions that represent the same number or amount. We might need to write the same number as a different fraction when we're using fractions in different scenarios or contexts. So remember that equivalent fractions, I've got some visual representations here, they're the same value even though they might look different. They're fractions that name the same amount or part. So here's an example. You can see that 1/2, which is the yellow one, is the same as 2/4, represents the same amount of space, or the same shape almost, and it's also the same as 4/8. Just a quick recap on mixed numbers, improper fractions. We are going to head more into this later in the week and next week. Mixed numbers and improper fractions always represent fractions which are greater than 1. You can see there we've got proper fractions, which are just the normal fractions where the numerator is smaller than the denominator. Improper fractions where the numerator is larger than the denominator or equal to. And mixed fractions or mixed numbers, which have a whole number component and a fraction component. We might have to find equivalent fractions in improper fractions and mixed numbers. This is called an equivalent fraction wall. You've probably seen something very similar before. It shows which fractions are equivalent to one another, and we're going to use this today to actually compare fractions and to help us do it visually. So let's look at some fraction families altogether first. The whole family. We are composed of 2/2 or 4/4 quarters. So remember that I told you earlier in the week that whenever a numerator and a denominator are the same, that it represents one whole. Okay, so that's really key to remember. All right, guys, let's have a look at some fraction families for halves. You can see here the 1/2 bar, and then we're comparing it to fourths first, or quarters, sorry, and you can see that the 1/2, this whole bar along the top, is the same as 2 quarter bars. So I'm going to write a 2 for the numerator here because it's 2, 2 quarter bars. Then we're going to compare a half, which is again our top one, to how many sixths we have. And so how many sixths little parts are equal to 1/2? We can see that there's 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1/2 is equal to 3/6. Take a note and see that 2 is half of 4 and 3 is half of 6, just like 1 is half of 2. It's good to try and spot some patterns as we're going today. The next one we're going to compare to is eighths. How many eighths make up 1/2? We can see that 1, 2, 3, 4 eighths make up 1/2, the same space as 1/2. And then finally tenths. We're going to compare how many tenths parts are equivalent to 1/2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You might have been able to predict that by thinking what's half of 10. Okay, so they're our half. So it's really good to remember half, 2 quarters, 3/6, 4/8, 5/10. What do you think would come next? How many twelfths? The next one we're going to look at is 1/3, and I'm going to do the same thing that we did previously. 1/3, how many sixths is that equal to? You can see there that 1/3 is equal to 2 sixths. 2 sixths takes up the same space as 1/3. The next one we're going to look at is 1/3 is equal to how many ninths? You can see that 1/3 takes up the same amount of space as 3/9. And finally, the next one that we're going to look at is 1/3 is equal to how many twelfths? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1/3 takes up the same amount of space as 4 twelfth parts. See if you can see the pattern between those ones. How many 15ths would 1/3 be equivalent to? See if you can see the pattern of the denominators that we are counting in. Okay, and then see if there's a pattern between the numerators as well. Okay. So the fraction family for this one is 1/3, then 2 sixths, 3/9, 4 twelfths, and 5 15ths. Oops. The next one we're going to look at is quarters, and we're going to look at how many 1/4 is equivalent to. How many eighths is it equivalent to? Well, you can see there that 1/4 is the same as 2/8. How many twelfths is it equal to now? You can see that 1/4 is equal to 3/12. Oops. And then finally, how many 16ths is 1/4 equivalent to? You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's our fraction family for that one. 1/4, then 2/8, 3/12, 4/16. What might come next? And can you start to see a bit of a pattern? Right, for fifths, we're looking at 1/5 first of all, and how many tenths that's equivalent to. I had to draw my own fraction wall for this one. I couldn't find a picture online. You can see here that 1/5 is equivalent to 2/10. Now, if I draw a rough other one here, we would have 15ths, and that would look like 15th, 1/15th, 1/15th, and it would show that 1/5 is also equivalent to 3/15. And then my next one would show that 1/5 is also equivalent to 4/20. So that's my fraction family there: 1/5, 2/10, 3/15, and 4/20. Okay, see if you can spot the pattern between the denominators and the numerators. All right, let's have a look at some examples. You might get some questions like this in your quests today. Have a look. The question says 4/8 is the same as how many quarters? So there's 1, 2 eighths, 3 eighths, 4 eighths. So the question's asking me 4/8 is equivalent to how many quarters? Well, it's more than 1 quarter. It goes all the way up to 2 quarters. So 4/8 is the same as 2 quarters. Oops, yeah. 3/4 is the same as how many eighths? So I'm going to look on my fraction wall and I'm going to say, well, here's 1, 2, 3 quarters. And then that is the same as how many eighths? So I'm going to highlight the same amount of space and it matches up perfectly, which is good because otherwise they're not equivalent. And I can see that 3/4 is the same as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6/8. 3/4 is the same as 6/8. Which equivalent fractions are represented here? So I'm going to look at first the numerator 1, 2, 3. 3 parts are shaded out of a possible 3, 4, 5. And then this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are shaded out of a possible 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 3/5 is equivalent to, because you can see they take up the same amount of space, 6/10. The next one we're going to look at is 3/5 is the same as how many tenths? 1, 2, 3/5, so there's 3/5 there. And that's going to be the same as how many tenths? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, it was the same as the previous question. 3/5 is the same as 6/10. Next one we're going to look at is 1/3 is the same as how many sixths? You should remember this one from the fact family. There's 1/3, and I can see, oops, didn't draw that very straight, that 1/3 takes up the same amount of space and is equivalent to 2/6. Alright guys, our learning intention today has been to investigate equivalent fractions. Your success criteria is I can compare fractions by modelling them using visual aids. I know about different families of fractions and I can compare fractions by looking at the denominator. Hopefully you feel that you can do all those things and that, or if there is something that you feel like you can't do, make sure you talk to your teacher about it. If you feel like up for a challenge, name as many equivalent fractions as you can for 1/6. Your maths task today, grade 5s, you have a mathematics activity called Equivalent Fraction Wall 1 and Uneven Partition Shapes 2. And grade 6s, you have a mathematics activity called Equivalent Fraction Wall 1, which is the same as grade 5s. And you both have, everyone has a quest called Investigating Equivalent Fractions. Good luck.